reminder, it's a simple thing. And we're in that present moment. We remembered that. Now, I was awake at 6 a.m. this morning, but I wasn't having chai. I was having coffee.
I had to give it coffee.
But I do like the simple things because it reminds us about being in the present moment. And the present moment then helps us to address what we're going to talk about today. Today is the third in the series off of this book, The Complaint-Free World, which is by Will Bowen. And today's section is really called the Conscious Competence. Because what we've addressed in before is that many of us didn't realize we were even complaining. Most people, if you ask them, I think I mentioned this before, would tell you they probably complain less than 5 times a day. And yet what we know is when we start this practice, some of us complain up to 30 times a day. We don't realize it. When you start becoming aware of it, you start becoming aware of the subtleties. And as you move through the period like this phase we're in right now, it's really called the one of hypersensitivity. And it's called hypersensitivity because we are conscious. For many of us, we're in our 3rd week of really focusing on this. I got a head start. I'm in like my 5th week. And 15, 20 minutes ago, I'm back to day 1. Which I'll tell you about later when I fess up. But that's what we do. Because we're going for this, we're becoming hypersensitive. And what that means is we're starting to be aware of what we're saying. We are in the present moment. If there is power in our words, then we should be mindful of the words that we speak. And the words will carry the same energy, whether they're in a positive or a negative. So what we know as Science of Minors is that what we know and what we think is what we create. And Ernest Holmes, our founder, says, change your thinking, change your life. Well, you can't change your life if you're not aware of what you're saying. It just goes, bleh. I know none of you do that. But some of us do. Some of us actually speak without thinking. And you know that when you're reaching out there to pull the words back in, saying, oh my God, why did I say that? And we can't because it's out. It's out there. So this period of hypersensitivity. I was so proud. Last week I was up to day 3 and then day 4 and I was really cocky. And then I was day 1. But I'm on it. I'm keeping on it because you know you can't get to the end until you actually do it one day at a time. That's why it's called a practice. There's a story in here that I think is cute. You know, Christopher Columbus had a tough time sailing, right? He was sailing on unknown things. And nobody at all would have blamed him for giving up. But nobody would remember him either. And that's the same thing with the bracelets and the going for a complaint free. It's tough. And many people won't blame you for giving up. But you will know when you get that 21 days. You will know. And along the way, like today, day 6. Hello, day 1. Tomorrow will be day 2. I'm hoping. I'm looking for a day 2. So today we're going to talk about silence and the language of complaining. And I've already alluded to the language of complaining already about the power of our words, whether negative or positive. And then we're also going to talk about criticism and sarcasm. Who knew that I was ever sarcastic? Even my best friends would not let me know. But Will Bowen in this book has let me know that I tend to. Yesterday I had to turn my, not yesterday, yes, actually I was on day 6 yesterday and I turned my bracelet back yesterday. I turned it back again today. Yesterday I had to turn it back on day 6 because I uttered a complaint that I didn't even realize was totally a complaint. I'm a kind of guy who likes to be on time. Unfortunately, like many people, whatever values we have for ourselves, we tend to project out onto other people. And you know, we're not all alike. I know, it surprises me all the time. And so this person was going to get back to me in 5 minutes. And an hour later, he called. And I said, oh, you must think 5 minutes is an hour over here. He didn't understand what my complaint was. That's sarcasm. That is a complaint wrapped up as a sarcasm. But I get ahead of my story. Many of us, in this moment of being hypersensitive to what we're saying, it gives us a moment to be in the silence. Driving up here today is like most Sunday mornings. I don't have the radio on, I don't have the CD on, I don't have anything on. I'm just with myself. And what I thought about silence is we are such a world that's full of noise and distraction that many of us have the radio on or a CD on the cars all the time. When we turn our cars off at night and when we start the engine in the morning, it's instant noise. We're never alone with our thoughts because instantly things are coming in. Will Bowen tells the story when he was a young man, a teenager. His family used to go up to this lake and they had a cottage on the edge, and then there was this beautiful secluded island out there. And Will used to go out there and camp out overnight. And so this one day he's paddling this canoe and he's starting off, and his father calls from the shore, "Where are you going, Will?" And he says, "I'm going to go out to the island and camp overnight." He said, "Don't you want to take a TV? I've got a portable TV, battery operated." And Will said, "No thanks." He said, "How about a radio?" And Will said, "No thanks." And he kept going. And what Will knew is he loved his father very much, but he and his father were different people. His father fell asleep with the television on full blast. I've been there. I know that. I've done all of these things. I now know how to hit an off button. That's all it takes, is off. And to be in the silence. And we can be in the silence, we can be with ourselves. We can take that moment to be with the God self within us. To be that which absolutely connects us. That's what I like about meditation. It's that invitation to absolutely be connected, to be with ourselves, with that which created us, that which we are here to express. We're all unique. We're the only people who can do it. So we have to be present. And when we're present, we can do that. And so, if you like to pray, this is the good stage to be in, this hypersensitive thing, because you can start to pray in the silence. You can start to pray that you're guided to breathe before you speak. When they first started doing these bracelets, oh, I switched wrists. It's over here. This is thanks to Rosalind. I had to shift. I want to give credit where credit is due. Rosalind's a dear friend of mine. That's complaint. I'm outed. I'm outed by my expert. So anyway, now you know you've seen good demonstrations of sarcasm. I don't have to do it anymore. But what it does is it allows us to go within and take that moment of quiet and that moment of reflection so that we can absolutely say what we intend to say. And you know, it's so important to remember how powerful our words and our thoughts are. There's another story in here that I really like because I believe it. And that's the story of when Will was young and poor and before he was a minister. I don't know that he got richer after becoming a minister, but before he became a minister, he had moved from one state to another state and he wanted to go back and get his belongings. he didn't have a truck, so he asked his friend of his to borrow his truck. And this guy said yes. It was a 20-year-old truck, had a couple 100,000 miles on it. So yes was easy. He borrowed the truck, and I got 20 miles to the quart of oil. So knowing this, Will put a box of 30 weight in the back of the truck and took off and went and got his stuff and packed it up. And on the way back, he said, I used to live around here. I know a shortcut that will go from this highway to this highway, and it'll cut hours off. And as he's traveling down and he's admiring the scenery, he sees the engine check light come on. Now, he'd already checked it and thought everything was all right. But he also knew the stretch of the road, there were very few houses and very few cars. And at first he started to think negatively, which some of us do. We say, oh no, not again. Oh, of course. This always happens to me. And he started to go there. And he said, no, I'm not going to. I'm going to say that it's going to work out okay. I'm going to know that it's all going to be okay. He was traveling with his dog, and the dog was just laying there yawning. It was okay. So what Will knew is that it was going to be okay. So the truck sputtered, chugged a little bit, and stopped. But it stopped right in front of a long driveway with a house up at the end. And Will said, maybe nobody's home. I don't see any movement. But he says, I know it's going to be okay. And maybe they'll have a phone I can use. I know it's going to be okay. And what he said is, I intend to hold this vision that it's not only going to be okay, but I'm going to be home with all my belongings in the truck tonight. And he visualized himself wearing all the clothes he had and everything, and he saw himself at home. Then he got up and he went up to the knock, and he stood at the door for a while. He didn't hear any noise inside, but he rang the doorbell, and a guy came to the door and asked if he could help him. And he said, yes. And he said, do you have a phone I can borrow? And he said, what's your problem? He said, my truck needs service down at the bottom. And the guy said, what kind of truck do you have? He says, it's a Ford. He said, I'm the Ford dealer in town. He said, of course. Of course you are. So Will went down, and the guy went down, and he checked his truck, and he said, well, you got a simple problem here, but it's not a mechanic's problem, it's really a plumbing problem. And Will says, But he said, where would I get a plumber? And the guy said, well, actually, my father is a plumber, and he happens to be staying here. Let me go get him. And Will said, of course. So then he went and got to Dad, and he brought in, and he says, oh, well, it's a problem simple. All you need is this 6-inch piece of tubing, and it costs like 20 cents at the hardware store. And, of course, this is at 6 o'clock at night, right? And the son says, you mean like this? Pulled it out of his toolbox. And the father said, where did you get this? And he said, I don't know. It was laying on my workbench about a month ago, and I thought I might need it, so I threw it in the toolbox. And Will said, of course. Of course. Because we visualized it, right? So he was fixing, he was on his way, and nothing flat. That is the of course, right? You could say, this always happens to me, and put the negative energy on it. Or you can say, this always happens to me, and put the positive energy. What do you want? Which do you want to call into your manifestation? What do you want? Do you want the positive or the negative? It's your choice. It's the same energy. You can call it in. You can call it into being. You know that both Thomas Jefferson and Martin Luther King both were very inspirational. But what they did is they didn't take a complaint. They stated concerns that they did not like, and then they painted a better picture and they sold it. Thomas Jefferson sold it as a declaration. Martin Luther King sold it, I have a dream. Without that speech, nobody would have remembered him. That is known to be the greatest speech in the 20th century. I have a dream. I have been to the mountaintop. He was a positive thinker. He was not a complainer. That was not a complaint statement. That was a thing that brought everybody up, lifted him up, and took him along with him. We forget that. We forget how to motivate and lead people, how to be with them, how to do that. We think complaining will do it. And complaints only puts up defenses. Complaints only shut us down. But when we're open, then we can engage, we can be part of it. Part of that story, there was another story demonstrating that was the CEO of a successful company. It was just growing in leaps and bounds, and then it started to plateau, and then it started to go down, and they called Will in to consult, and he's talking. And part of the story came out as the guy didn't know how to lead a successful company. He was a hard driver, so he drove his people hard, because that's what brought him success. And after a while, they started shutting down. They didn't drive by the complaint, the product. The guy took a sabbatical and took the summer off and went out and drove cows. Now that's very forward thinking, that this executive took a leave of absence from a company that was stagnating and went out and drove cows. And you know what he learned? He learned that cows will start to shift their body when they get ready to move. And what he learned from the cowhands, if you see them shifting in the direction you want them to go, you nudge them. And then you back off. Nudge and back off. That is one of the things he took back to his company to lead. Rather than drive people, rather than complain, rather than to say, why did you forget this? Don't you know why we're going? Da, 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 da. He waited for them, their creative stuff, to come up. He nudged them when they were in the direction he wanted them to go, and he backed off and let them go. I see that in so many things that I do, not because of me personally doing that, and sometimes it is because of, but I see other people. People are so willing to lead in their own areas of responsibility. And they're creative. And yes, they may not do it exactly the way you want them to do it, but they're doing it, and maybe better than you can think. So you nudge and back off. And then the other thing is sarcasm. I said I would talk about that. And criticism is really an attack. Sarcasm, when you look it up, is an old Latin word, is ripping the flesh. Is that a visual? Ripping the flesh. Because what happens is people use sarcasm as a veiled way to make a complaint without an investment. Because they say, I was just kidding. And how many of us have bought that? I am just kidding. I was just teasing. And can't you take a joke? And you were being funny. We think being funny is part of it. So what we have to be careful is when sarcasm, and my remark yesterday was not funny to the person who was left me hanging for about an hour. So I wasn't funny, but I was sarcastic, and it totally went over his head. So I got the message that, oh yes, okay, God, yes, I will use that tomorrow. Because that's what really happens. So just remember that when you criticize somebody, you're inviting demonstrations to prove you're right. For those of you who have had children, I did this one too, and it took me down memory lane. When my son was a teenager and going through school, he was very bright, or so I thought. Now, all parents think the children are very bright, so I was not unusual. But he would get A's in the subjects he loved, and he got C's and worse in the subjects he did not care about. I did not see the A's. I saw the C's in others, because I wanted him to be successful. I kept telling him, Dennis, you need to get into a top school to do all the things you really want to do. You need to bring up those grades. And for years later, I had to apologize for those remarks because he did very, very well in so many areas. And I probably said, yes, good, but. Good, but. I was trying to drive. So he was performing exactly the way I was expecting him to. When you criticize, you're telling somebody how you see them. When you criticize, you're telling them it's behavior that they should get back to you because that's the behavior you expect. And since we all know that we're God, namaste, why aren't we greeting the God in them? Why aren't we holding up their greater magnificence? Why aren't we seeing the light in them? Why aren't we able to overlook the shadows? And when we're looking at them, how much of it is we're looking in the mirror and we're seeing a reflection of ourselves back? It's an opportunity. Let me close with saying this is a story in China of an old woman who had two sons. One son was a salt seller, and the other son sold umbrellas. And so each morning she would look out at the weather, and if it was raining, she would say, oh, nobody's going to buy my son salt today. It's raining. If the day was sunny, she'd say, oh, nobody's going to buy my son's umbrellas. It's not raining. After many years of this, she was very unhappy, and she went to a Buddhist monk, and she said, why am I so unhappy? He says, change what you're happy about. In the morning, say that you're happy that it's not raining so that your son's salt will sell. Say on the days it's raining that you're happy because it's a day that your son with the umbrellas will sell many. It's all perception. That's all it is. The reality hasn't changed. The reality in none of our lives really changes. It's really all up to us and how we view it, how we see it. Will Bowen said, life is an illusion. Our perspective is a delusion. Choose the delusion that brings you the only thing that matters. Choose to be happy. Thank you.